Right, good afternoon, everyone. I think we're going to get going now with our session. You'll notice that there is a QR code on screen, and then there's a bit.ly link of that same QR code if you want to rather type that in. It'll take you to a little mini landing page, and all that you need to do is just select the in-session register. Um, for those of you who are struggling with that, I'm just going to quickly add a link in the chat that you can also use. Just give me a second. All right, so there's a link in the chat as well. Right, so what we want to look at today is the virtual facilitation that we have in general and how we can make it a little bit better, improve what we have been doing, so that we can say with certainty the quality of our virtual presentations have improved. What we find, there's a sense from some people that we have to do face to face again. The virtual presentation isn't working, etc., etc. But we also have to, at the same time, realize that we're getting a lot of people that are joining our sessions. So something about what we are doing is still resonating with a lot of the teachers. What we can do, however, and what I think is important for us to look at, is that we improve what we are doing. Just before I get going, I just want to make sure, can everyone hear me clearly? Can I just get a thumbs up or a message? Someone can just actually tell me they can hear me.
We can hear you, Jaco.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Right. So what we want to look at today, we're going to look at different sharing modes. We're going to understand how we maximize screen real estate, make it as big as possible. We're going to have a look at annotation tools. And then what we also want to look at is how we add some participant interaction tools. Now, this is by no means an exhaustive list of how to do all those things. These are just a couple of tricks that I've picked up along the way to just improve what I am doing. Now, I have to bear with me. It's always a bit of a tricky thing to present teams within teams. So we're going to try our best. But the first thing we need to look at is the sharing modes and when we are going to use which one. Now, in order to do this effectively, there's a tool that I'm going to use that I'll talk about a little bit later. So I don't want to give too much away with regards to the tool. But just so that we understand a little bit better when we look at screen sharing, what we can actually do with screen sharing, right? So, right now, when we talk about screen sharing, there are different types of screen sharing that we can use. And the important thing is we all tend to get stuck on sharing our whole screen. Now, sharing a whole screen has the distinctness that if you have two screens, like I'm fortunate to have, then the sharing your whole screen thing can actually work quite well. If we don't, we really want to try and avoid a situation where every time we go back to Teams, we end up going and checking, did anyone say something? I just want to see anyone say something. No one said anything. Okay, now we can go back to, we don't want to have this screen popping up the whole time. And it's difficult to get away from that when we are sharing the whole screen. But there are definite advantages to sharing the whole screen. We're going to look at that in a second as well. What we also want to talk about, and I think this for me is in a sense the key one to discuss, is the concept of sharing a window instead of sharing a screen. And we're just going to look at that in a little bit more detail to try and understand that. Then there's also the option of sharing the PowerPoint live, which works in the Teams desktop app only. And then the other option of sharing a tab, which is a very nifty little feature that works in the web app only. Right. So first and foremost, let's get going with sharing the whole screen. Right. So when we share the whole screen, it's important to note that what we are in fact doing, just want to make this nice and thick so everyone can see. What we're in fact doing is everything that is going to be displayed in this entire screen is going to show, right? And it's, oops. Okay, so the purple one that you're seeing, that is sharing my whole screen. What that means is we're also going to have the, we'll also see automatically any of the windows that are open there. So these windows, any of these things that are actually open will automatically show whenever I switch to it. I'm fortunate in that when I'm switching to these things, you'll see there that it floats over there. A lot of them are open on my other screen. So that means I can actually still work on that screen without whatever I'm doing on that screen interfering. So it's quite nifty. I've, for example, got a little notepad here with some links I want to paste later. Obviously, I've got the teams that I'm sharing with on this side. So that works quite well when we're doing it like that, right? So our second option that we have is when we want to share the window, what it actually does is it shares everything up until that point. So in other words, it's not going to actually show you what's happening in the start bar. Right? So the start bar that we see here at the bottom, that part is going to be removed. What that means, and this is especially important if you are not working on multiple monitors, that would mean that if I were to share a window and not a screen, I would be able to switch between these two windows, right? So remember, this is now technically, this is window 2, and this one that I've got open here, my Google Chrome, is window 1. So if I decide I'm only going to share window 1, then whenever I switch to window 2, this one, it's not actually going to show on your end. And that is important because it just makes the whole presentation flow better. We have to understand that some teachers can get very flustered if they're trying to look at a presentation. The next minute, suddenly Teams appears inside of their Teams because they also don't understand how to maximize content, how to make it bigger, etc., etc. So the window mode is incredibly important to use when we are working on our desktop. Then the next mode that I'm not going to show you now, but the PowerPoint Live, before we get to that, let's just quickly discuss the difference between when we are working in a tab, how the tab sharing also works. This is something that's more common. I'm just going to erase all of this quickly. More commonly associated with using it in other browsers or in something like Google Meet. But you can do it in Teams now as well, where we'll actually be able to open a second tab and say, we're only going to share the one tab. Now, in terms of the viewing experience, this is arguably the very best because what happens is we only get to see whatever's in that tab. So what that means is everything here is taken away. And everything over here is also taken away. So it's something that you can explore and something that you can play with a little bit in terms of that. But you can imagine if this was the way that I was viewing things and I had only this block, only this viewing experience that you see there in front of you. It really can focus the attention of the audience very well, which is ideally what we want, to be able to do that. Now, I'm not really going to go into too much detail here, but there's one very cool advantage between when we are using the PowerPoint Live. But it is not something that I think we will do very often in terms of the training that we are going to do from e-learning's perspective. But the PowerPoint Live gives you the ability to make clickable links inside of the presentation. So, for example, my one colleague was moaning now, why was this not a link that you could click on? If it was a PowerPoint Live session, it would have been able to be one. But if it's a PowerPoint Live, I can't do a lot of this kind of annotation that I'm doing at the moment. PowerPoint itself naturally has annotation tools built into it. But more often than not, we're going to find ourselves wanting to use one of these. Now, the question is, and this is why I put this little thinking guy here in the corner, and that is that we have to give it some thought. When we are doing this, sorry. we have to actually think a little bit carefully about what we are going to do in terms of how we want to share our screen. This does take a little bit of practice when you're not quite used to it yet. So I suggest that ideally, what works best is if you can get a colleague that you can practice with. Remember, a lot of our sessions, we have a trainer and we have someone that acts in support. So it's a good idea to have two people, or when you are sharing, have the other person check what you are doing, because it has happened before, and this has happened to me often. When I share my screen, I think they see what I want them to see, but then they don't actually see that. So what we kind of are inclined to do is we are inclined to just go share the whole screen. That's the easiest. Let's go. And then we're off, because it is the simplest. It is definitely the simplest. And there are situations where we have to use it. For example, if you're going to do a session in how to use PowerPoint, well, if we're just going to use this, how to use PowerPoint, you might want to share the window instead and say, I'm going to share the PowerPoint window, right? I'm not going to share my screen. I'm actually going to just share the PowerPoint. But if we've got, for example, a PowerPoint and we've got a PDF and we've got a this and we've got a that and we've got a this, and we need to switch between these things, then sharing the screen becomes an important thing to do. So then what we also do, and a lot of what we tend to do in our e-learning development, is we tend to look at web-based tools, because I mean, a lot of e-learning tools, I think everyone will agree, are web-based tools. So that happens in a browser, whether you're using Google Chrome, which is the more commonly used one, or whether you're using Edge, or maybe you're using something else. Maybe you're using Safari on a Mac, or you're using, I don't know what other things, Firefox, or etc., etc. But if we're doing that, then we can definitely use the share a window, because we can have our PowerPoint in one window, and then let's say, for argument's sake, we are doing a, let me just get rid of this green block here at the top. Let's say we are doing a session on how to work with Google Forms. Then I can definitely have that. Yeah, I've got my presentation where I'm talking through my presentation. Once I've talked through my presentation, I actually want to start presenting the tool. I go to Google Forms. Now, spoiler alert, you'll notice there's a problem with my cool annotation tool. Everyone was maybe getting quite excited about this cool tool. It's just there still. So now I need to delete it every time. Don't worry, we're going to get to that. We're going to show you a couple of cool tricks around that as well. Right, so sharing the window, what a basic rule of thumb when we're looking at this is, when we're actually going to do whole screen sharing, is when we want to do desktop apps, right? So for desktop apps, we're probably going to end up using, let's just make this a bit bigger. Come now. Right, so for our desktop apps, we'll probably use that. And then again, for our on our window, we'll probably end up using for the shared window, we want to have a look at specifically our web-based apps. Again, this takes a little bit of practice, getting used to it, how we actually go about using these different tools or these different sharing modes. The share tab only, when we look at that, I kind of like it a lot, but it does mean that you have to use the web-based Teams, which takes other functionality out of the equation. So again, once you're used to experimenting between these two, then you can go have a look. The key thing is, and it's really a simple case of thinking about the screen sharing mode that you're using, instead of just saying, just share the whole screen. Let's just go for it. Because at the end of the day, we have to look at what we've been doing. I'm going to see, yeah, there's someone's mic on. I'm going to give a second for questions now. We have to think carefully about how we've been presenting and how we can improve on what we've been doing. Because we've been doing this now for 2 years. And I really think there's a lot of potential for us to improve what we're doing. And this is a simple start. And it's more indicative of thinking about how we're presenting than just necessarily the what we're doing itself. Right. At this point in time, before we move to the next part, are there any questions specifically that you would like to ask? Or comments that you would want to make? Nothing. Right. So, can I just get like a thumbs up? We're ready to go to move ahead to the next thing. Marna, thanks for sharing the link. I see you shared it with everyone there. It's great that we were taking a little bit of initiative. Right, perfect. Okay, I hope you're finding this interesting at the very least so far. Right, let's move ahead to the next bit. So improved viewing. This is a simple thing, really, but we have to be mindful of how things are being viewed. That I'm sharing with you now, I often talk about the screen real estate that we're using. So technically, if I were to say, let me just quickly go into this here. Right. The last thing that we want to see is this, what you're seeing now in front of you. In other words, a PowerPoint or a slide that is in the editing mode and not in the presenting mode. Because technically speaking, what's happening here is this part in red is our presentation, right? That's our presentation. Everything else around it is noise and is distracting in terms of what we actually want people to focus on. And I mean, this ties into the rest of what we're saying. And if you actually go, and I did this once and I measured it, I can't remember exactly what it is, but if we're in this presentation mode, we are only using, I think, barely 60% of the screen is being used for the presentation that we want to show. Right? So really, really important that you can't do this. Simple thing that you need to remember. Now, I personally, because I like using the sharing my window, doing it in Teams, and the same applies to other things. You've always got this nice little trick if you are here and you still want to be able to navigate between your thing, going instead of going and just clicking slideshow, going into presenter view, because the presenter view is quite nifty in that it will share the screen like this. So it's a tab, so it's still accessible. And then all that you can do is by hitting F11, it goes into full screen mode. Now I'm using even more. Now the only thing it's still going to bug people is this bar here at the bottom. But the great part is if I'm sharing a window and not my screen, you won't see that part. Right. Obviously, for reasons I'm sure you've figured out by now, I have to share my entire screen. It's not something I tend to do, but it's an important thing. An important thing to remember is maximizing whatever it is happening on the screen. We have to be aware of the fact, unfortunately, it doesn't matter how often we say this, there are still many people that are signing into our sessions with their cell phones. So if you're talking about a 7-inch or an 8-inch screen and you are only using 70% of it for your presentation, this is becoming a serious problem. We have to consider that that's not working for us, right? So when we are, so presenter mode is very important. Then full screen mode also important. F11 is the secret button when it comes to that very often. F11 will take you to full screen mode. In many apps, many things, it'll just takes away some of what is being shown. The same applies to many things. If I take, for example, now I'm going to go and try and find an appropriate one. I didn't think about doing this beforehand. Okay, now it might take a little bit long. But even if we're using something like a PDF, try and find a full screen mode. If you're using a Word document, hide ribbons. Make as little of the tools as possible viewable. So just spend some time. It goes back to the same concept, and that is thinking a little bit about what we're doing instead of just doing it. Right. Zooming in and out. Now I'm not listening to myself here at this point in time. because I'm actually not doing this correctly. So a simple trick with zooming, right? Zooming in and out. It's a simple thing that you can do by just holding down control on, again, if you're doing a browser-based thing, control with your mouse, it's going to zoom in and out. Most apps that you're using will do that. If you really need to do it, a pretty cute way of doing it, if you are doing a screen sharing, is using the magnifier that's built into Windows. This magnifier will give you that kind of zoomed in look. If you see what I'm doing here, you can do it even more so if you want to really get into what's going on. The magnifier is quite a nifty little thing. If for example, we're focusing on those tools and I just want to focus in on them, add the magnifier, and then you've got a closer view of the waffle where you can get into the waffle in a bit more detail, right? So this is a tool, and we're going to talk about that when we get to the annotation tools in detail. That works well if you're doing screen sharing. If you're not going to share your entire screen, the magnifier will not do anything. And that's going to take us neatly to our next thing I want to talk about, making your cursor bigger. And maybe someone can share a cool tool that they use for this. There are lots of different ways of doing it. I'm going to show you what I found by far the simplest, yet it's also got its limitations, way of doing it. And please remember, we are talking to trainers. Well, this is a session with trainers. So I am going to work with the understanding and expectation that you've also got a couple of cool little tricks up your sleeve. So please do not hesitate to share with us. So what I can also do is I can go to the start bar and just type in cursor. If you type in cursor, you'll see there's an option that says change mouse pointer color. Now, important to take note with this. So here it gives me this option of changing the pointer color and changing the size of my pointer. So if I do that over here, you'll see suddenly my pointer is becoming very big. Now there comes a time, there is a little, yes, Ilanka, I'm getting to that now, because this herein lies the little problem with this trick. So this is very cool, and yeah, I can change it, and it's great. It's got an advantage in that it doesn't matter where I go with my cursor, it's always nice and big and nice and visible. The problem is, if I'm going to share a window, as is something that I tend to prefer to do, and not my whole screen, then the color will change, but the size will not change. It'll go down to that size. So you'll have this little yellow cursor, which is arguably even harder to spot than a white cursor, let's be honest. So if you're going to be sharing your entire your entire screen, so typically, as we said, your desktop apps that you might be doing, then this is the easiest way by far to do it. There we go. Easy peasy. I've got that thing. I can open my cursor and it's going to look like that. But the only reason why you're seeing it like this is because I'm sharing my screen. What Ilanka has pointed out is the other way to do it, which is again the way that works very well when we're doing our window sharing and when we're sharing a browser. So let me just quickly get my cursor back to the way it was. Change again, just to show you very quickly. Let's just get rid of this little block. So just again, on the start menu, we just type cursor, change mouse pointer color. You can also type pointer. Right. Yes, thanks, Ilanka. Then I'm just going to make it small and I'll make it white, and there we go. What Ilanka is referring to is, I don't know if it's the same one that you're using, but there's a nice little Chrome extension that you can use. And if you're not using Chrome extensions yet, if there's nothing else that you learn from this session, it will change your world if you're not using these extensions yet. There's my little button to my extension. So if I go on there, I think I might have drawn over it now, and I click on that, there's a little custom cursor for Chrome extension, right? So custom cursor for Chrome. Once I open that up, there's a whole bunch of different cursors that you can choose. So you can get kind of weird if you want to. There's a couple of funny ones if we decide we want to go for a pirate theme. Right, I'm going to go for a pirate one. I'll be honest, my first impressions of this pirate one is that it's actually even harder to spot. Right, so I tend to just go for a good old simple, the yellow one. The yellow one seems to have nice kind of contrasts. And then I also like the purple, or the pink one is also usually quite contrasting, depending on the kind of um, the app or whatever it is that you're going to be using. But there's a whole bunch of different ones, and this is also quite cute, I suppose, if you're in your classrooms as well. It's going to add a little bit of a flavor to the what you're doing. If you want to do like gardening things, this does look a little bit like a zombie hand. I'm not going to lie to you, but anyway, let's just go to my stock standard. I always use this yellow one. And again, you can change the size of this thing, so I can make it silly in terms of size, or I can just make it a nice little medium size there. Now, the disadvantage of this one again is you'll see that whenever I float over there, when I'm talking about system things, then it does not have that. It doesn't highlight anymore. So the cursor only highlights inside of the app. So I often say that you have to understand that this part is all about. No, it doesn't want to show. This part that you see here at the top, that is part of your window. None of your apps are going to actually have. Yes, you're 100% correct, Gail. One can quickly get silly with these things and make it too big. So there's always a happy medium of it's big enough for people to see, but small enough that it doesn't get in the way. So you have to understand any of these things that we're gonna the extensions that we will use inside of a browser. It will only work in this viewing pane, I suppose you can call it. So it's only going to work in this section of this. It won't work in your top part. So, for example, one of the sessions that we've had that have happened quite often is the Google Fundamental Session 1, which deals with the inner workings of Chrome. And again, this goes back to thinking about how we're going to present. If we're going to present something like that, we're probably going to realize that this is not going to work for us, because we want to be able to go into multiple profiles, and we want to talk about extensions and things like that. And then suddenly my cursor is not really doing the trick for me. Right. No, Craig, I'll get to the annotation bit is the next bit, because I think that's the part where it gets, well, where I get quite excited about what you can do. Right. So are there any questions about this improved viewing? Really think about whoever is viewing whatever is happening on screen, right? That really becomes important. We want to make things legible. We want to make things clear. And I think step number one, as we spoke about, is definitely the idea of making sure that we're using the appropriate kind of sharing mode. Step number two is making sure that we maximize the screen and focus the attention in whatever way we can. Step number three, and that's the part that you've all been asking about now, is annotation. How do I do annotation? Now, I think a lot of us will probably, I'm hoping at least many of us know that you can do annotations inside of something like PowerPoint. It's got built-in annotation tools. It's one of the weaknesses many people say about slides. It doesn't have built-in annotation tools. I'm going to show you how we get around that now in a second. So, annotation tools. Now, like with all of these things, there are two ways to do it. So the cursor is a great way of thinking about it. The one way works very well browser-based. The other way works when we share a screen. So let's first talk about, I can't remember which one I said first, but let's first talk about the Teams built-in annotation. Right. So Microsoft Teams has built-in annotation tools. Did anyone know that? Has anyone used the Microsoft Teams built-in annotation tools? Just out of curiosity. I only discovered it recently while I was kind of looking at the different options. Has anyone used it? Does anyone know about it? I'm going to take the silence as a no, we don't really know about it. Now, what I actually want to say with that is a very simple. It doesn't really work, in my opinion, right? So the reason why, and the idea behind it is fine. There's nothing wrong with it. But what the built-in annotation tools of Teams does, from my viewing, and please, if I'm wrong, I see Renee, you say you know about it. If I'm wrong, then you're welcome to correct me. Because I haven't really explored it extensively. I tried it and realized, I don't know if this works. But the problem is a lot of teams, and it's going to tie into what we're looking at in the next part as well. It works well if we're doing it within an organization, and if the people that are in the session are people that are joining it with their Office 365 accounts, etc., etc. In other words, if we don't have your typical guest account, if we do have a guest account, it just doesn't work from what I saw from my viewing. It just doesn't show the annotation. The other part that it actually also does is it flattens the screen. So it essentially takes a screen capture of whatever you see, puts it into Microsoft Whiteboard, and then you start writing over that flat image. So for me, while there are uses in that, it feels to me like it's limiting. And there are other tools that are working well, that work better for me, like this one that I'm using here on the side, because it's great in the sense that I can go and I can write something. Okay, I'm not going to write out the whole something, but then I can just go back to my mouse and I can continue with the next thing. And it's not like a flattened screen and a new screen. Okay, Renee, do you want to elaborate what you mean by that? And Johnny, yes, we will share the recording. Okay, Renee, I'm going to connect with you.
I'm here.
Okay.
It does not work if you connect via the web,
Yes.
like I'm now in my web browser. So I don't see any annotation tools or even emojis and those things. So it doesn't work unless you work with the app on your laptop.
Yes, thanks. That's the thing with a lot of the Teams things that I've picked up is when you're working in Teams on the desktop app, and especially with people in your organization, then it works brilliantly. Then it does all those little tiny things we wanted to be able to do. But unfortunately, the issue is that we're not working in an environment where that is likely. What's more likely is that 60, 70, 80, even 90% of the people that are joining our sessions will be joining it via the web or via mobile device or in some way that they don't see the annotations. The nice thing about what I'm doing here is you can still see the annotations because it's a different way of doing it. Right. So my experience of the Teams built-in annotation is that it doesn't work. But my other experience with Teams is give it a while. They're probably going to sort out the kinks and it'll work well. So that we might get to a point where that is happening. Yes, we're getting to this tool that I'm using now because I see everyone's now asking for it. Right. So the tool that, or the options that we have is this one that I'm using, desktop annotation with a thing called My View Board. I'm not going to share the link now because then everyone's going to go and download it and start playing around with it. So just be patient. I will share the link and you can just Google My View Board and you'll find it. And what it actually is, My View Board, just to show you quickly, is it's actually a whiteboarding tool. There it is. And it's a really, really nice whiteboarding tool. I don't really use whiteboards for what I do most of the time, but I am 90% convinced that if I were to ever walk into a classroom, this is the tool that I would be using all the time because it does most of those things that you want a whiteboarding tool to do. You can go and explore it yourself, of course. Now I have lost the ability to do annotations on this tool, but you've got your presenter view, you've got your design view, so you can build up a thing, you can have multiple slides. You've got all sorts of cute little things like you can add, for example, you can add a clock in here if you wanted to. Let's just take that away. You can add a timer in if you wanted to. You've got your rulers. You've got all sorts of cool tools for whiteboarding purposes. And it is 100% free. All the functions that I'm using, at least, are 100% free. Where it starts costing money is when you get to the collaborative features of it, because it does have collaboration features, which I have not been able to explore, of course, but I think it could be quite cool when you start using polls, especially if you are in an environment where you are teaching and there are learners that have devices, whatever kind of devices they have. I'm very curious if any of you go out and try this and see, and you are in a position where you can try it with your learners. I'd love some feedback on what you can do with this, because it just feels like it works smoothly and it's easy to use and intuitive. But what we are interested in is, if you've installed this My View board, then you've got this option where it says switch between Windows Desktop and Whiteboard. I have no idea if this works for Mac. So I'm also curious, those Mac users out there. I think there's a Mac version, if I remember correctly, which would do essentially the same thing. But what's cool is the minute that I do this now, I switch to this mode where I've got this little thing floating on the side. But what's also quite nifty is I still have a number of these kind of little tools, so I can still bring in my timer. So I can still go browsing a website and whatever I want in the background, I've got my timer in there. I can bring in a calculator if I need a calculator for something. Those of you might be teaching maths. I know it's not a scientific calculator, which is unfortunate. And then you've got your basic little features, your spotlight, your magnifier, your all those little tools. So your typical tools that you expect in whiteboards. But what I like about it is it layers very well on the desktop, because it doesn't actually freeze things. It floats on top of what's ever happening in the background. Now, because it floats on top of things, what you have to keep in mind is effectively the way that this works from a Windows-based understanding is it creates a window on top of the windows. So if you are going to share your screen and you share in the window mode, then none of this will display. All that's going to display is you're going to see the Chrome browser that's sitting behind this, because that is the window that I'm going to share. Or alternatively, I will share my view board, and then you'll see, I imagine, black behind it, and then just these little floating items on top of it. So this works when we're sharing our whole screen, and it's got some really cool little features that's built into it. So I like, for example, when I'm supposed to present, if you're using Droid cams and things like that, it works very, very well. But yeah, I can just add my integrated camera. So there's me, hi, presenting to you. I haven't shown my face yet, so there you can see my face as well. But I mean, I can add this little thing in there. So if you're using a visualizer, you can set this up to present whatever way you want on a whiteboard. And that, I think, is a pretty cool thing to be able to do. Now, how do I get rid of this thing? Why doesn't it want to? Oh, there we go. Right. So, but that's quite nice. You can have your visualizer set up, so you can have your notes or your experiment or whatever it is that you need to show with your camera on screen. And next to that, you could have a little calculator, you could have a timer, you can have a stopwatch, etc., etc. So I think it's a really, really useful and really, really powerful tool in terms of setting up your display the way that you want to. And it's a great tool because it's one of those things that I really want to encourage you to play around with it and try it in your classroom environment as well. Because the more we use these tools, the more just comfortable we become with it, the more familiar we are with it. The first time you use any of these annotation tools, you always get stuck in the drawing mode, and then I'm trying to click on things and I end up making these little red dots everywhere because I forget I need to switch back to my mouse. But the more you use them, the more you just get comfortable with how they work and you get familiar with them. And the more you do it, the other thing that what I think why I didn't initially wasn't so drawn to these things. Yes, Classroom Screen is also a very cool tool. I agree entirely with you. I've seen that as well, but a lot of these tools I only discovered when I'd already left the classroom, technically speaking. So, but yes, go check out Classroom Screen as well. Thanks, Clifford. I see you share that. But one thing that I've also realized is you start getting better at writing with a mouse. You don't only need your actual your touch screens, etc. It is even better if you get that, of course. And if you have a smart board, or if you have an e-beam, or if you have any of those interactive devices, these tools work absolutely brilliantly with those things, of course. This thing even has a way that it's built in that does text recognition. I don't know how good it necessarily is. There we go. There's my hello. So it also does that. It's not as good as other text recognition software that I've seen, or handwriting recognition at least, but still quite useful. The big problem with this is, as with most annotation tools, when I do that and I draw my little smiley face, I'm enjoying this tool. This is great. Now I want to switch to the next thing. This smiley face, it looks a bit evil. It comes with me. And whenever I switch to the next thing, it just comes with me. So whatever I'm doing here is floating on top of the background. It doesn't stick to it. It floats with things all the time. So that's why there's a different tool that I tend to use actually a lot more than this one. I haven't used this one all that often, to be completely honest. It has its uses and it's great for certain things, definitely. But the one that I tend to use a lot more is one called annotate.net. So here at the top, it is a Chrome extension. So if I click on this little icon over there, it'll open up my, let me just take this away. Right, it'll open up this little dialog over here, and then I'm going to open my toolbar. Right, so there's my annotate.net. Now you'll notice there's one very big difference between these two. Once I start writing with it, when I go to the other tab, it does not come with it. Right, so new tabs, it sticks to tabs. What it does, even more so, yes, Anna. Right. It is a very cool tool. I'm sure you will agree. So when we get to something like this, where you're on the e-portal and I want to highlight things for my learners, I go here and I say STEM clubs, really important. The NSC exam results, really important. And I scroll and it sticks. Right? Same story applies to when I'm drawing circles and I'm scrolling. Ooh, I wonder why it does that. That's quite a new thing. Right, so you will notice I haven't actually tried it on the e-portal. There are some pages where this does work incredibly well, and then there are some pages where for some reason it's a little bit off. So here, for example, it's not actually picking up. It has to do with how the page is written. Where annotate.net really shines, of course, it was actually developed initially in response to this functionality, being able to have annotations on slides, because it sticks to your slide, right? So here, if I'm going to write screen sharing, I'm going to say screen sharing is great. And then I'm going to go to the next one. Let's just jump to slide 3. And improved viewing is great. And if I want to go back to screen sharing, you'll see it has stuck. The annotation that I've made, it is actually stuck to what it is, right? Why are you not seeing extensions? I'm not sure, Liesel. Are you not seeing this top part of my presentation where I've got these little... Okay, we're going to get to that now. Hopefully I'm going to be able to answer your question in a second. Right, let's just get back to our annotation tools. Right, so essentially what this means is you've got two options when it comes to annotation tools. And again, there are other things out there. This is not by no means the extent of annotation tools we have available. But in short, when we're looking at this tool over here, it's got more functionality, definitely has more functionality. The negative is it doesn't stick, and you have to share your whole screen if you want to use it. Right, so it's got more tricks up its sleeve, but it's also limited in that I'll have to have a look now, Liesel. We're going to get to that. Thanks, Clifford. Right, so there, when we've got the purple one or the pink one, That one is for our screen sharing, when we do entire screen sharing and not just desktop sharing. Sorry, when we do the screen sharing, it's desktop sharing. So the limitation is it floats on top of everything, it doesn't stick, and you have to share entire screen. The annotate.net, the strength of this thing is that it sticks to our pages. So in other words, if I have multiple tabs, I can scribble as much as I want to on one tab, click on the next tab, and the scribbles will not have come with me. When I go back to that tab, those scribbles are there again. You'll have to play around different websites, as we just saw now on the ePortal. It doesn't quite work as well as we want it to. On other websites, it works very, very well. So you'll have to play around where it does work and where it doesn't work, but it is a browser-based thing. So in other words, if I am using annotate.net, you'll also notice that I can only draw an arrow up to where the browser ends. I can't write anything over there, so I can't actually have things explaining the tools of the actual window. Right, so it's important that you understand those two concepts. So if we go again, if we go back to, if we're going to go back to, you have to excuse me now it starts getting to that point where I really need to concentrate because I've got two different annotation tools. I'm not always sure which one I am using. So if I go back to my very first concept of screen sharing, it's a simple case of when I'm going to do sharing a window, which is going to be typically my web apps, right? So here I'm using my, no, I can't write web apps, right? So I'm using my web apps, right? For this one, I will use annotate.net, right? Which I'm writing as am for some reason. If I'm using my desktop apps, showcasing desktop apps, then I'm probably going to rather use my viewboard, right? So my viewboard. Again, thinking about it, playing around with it, that's the only way that you will be able to actually come to terms with how it works. One key distinction, unfortunately, with annotate.net that I have to point out to you is while everything I showed you in my viewboard so far is free, annotate.net does come with a very small price tag. The free version allows you to write in black and black only, which doesn't kind of work with this, with the style that I have for my presentation. So the free version allows you to write in black only and allows only one highlighter color, and you can't change the thickness and things like that. So the paid for version allows you to have more than one color and the highlighters and different highlighters, along with some other tools that I have not really gone into using all that much. But it is, I think, 150 Rand a year, so it is not particularly expensive. It's about the cost of what some of what your chalk would have cost you back in the day. So that's what I look at it as, modern day chalk. So those are the two different tools that we're looking at in terms of annotation. Installing the thing, I see there's a lot of us that are asking about installing it. I'm going to make life easy for you. I'm just going to give you a link in the chat that will take you straight to it. Let me show you, rather than just tell you how it works, I'm going to show you quickly. If you've never installed extensions before, this is, or these things, this is how you do it. So I've just logged into a different account quickly. Right, so there we've got annotate, web annotations with screen sharing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add it to Chrome. And at this point in time, there's no button for extensions whatsoever, because this is my first extension on this account. I'm adding it quickly. Oh, the other thing about the annotate.net that's different than from this tool is this tool, again, it's not user dependent because it's on my desktop. Annotate.net is going to be different if I've got multiple Chromes open. So you can see there I've got my one Chrome open, there I've got a browser one open, or a guest one open, here I've got the new one open. So you're going to have one account is not going to be accessible. I mean, you can log it in on different ones if you need to. Okay, never mind, that gets too complicated. Right, so here we see now my little puzzle piece is there, and there's annotate web annotations. Right, now I'm going to click on it, and it's going to ask me to sign in or ask me for a free registration. I'm going to say free registration because you can get the free version. Now, a key thing with this, I played around with it. Maybe someone else can get it to work. It is better if you can use an educator account. So in other words, if you are if you've got an education email address, not just a Gmail account or not just the Office account or a Yahoo, some people still use that. But if you've got an @your-school account, then you qualify for a cheaper version of Annotate.net if you get the paid for version. If you get the free version, it doesn't really matter either way. You can try the WCG Schools account because technically that is supposed to be an educator account. I was trying to do it and it, for some reason, didn't want to pick up my account. But I'm not sure if my account might be dormant or if it is blocked on the, it could be that it's just simply blocked at the moment. Right. So then I go just sign up for, I'm just going to say sign up for a non-educator account. I suppose I can technically sign up for an educator account. See, right, and then I just say sign in with Google. I'm just going to use this account very quickly. Right, so now I've got my free account. I'm just going to say allow. You are allowed to do these things that you need to do. Okay, and then I have to go through this long process that I don't actually want to go through now. Right, just filling it in. Now, the important thing about Annotate.net, because it can bug you to death when it does this, if you're not aware of this little snag about Annotate.net. Right, if I've got a new tab, a blank tab, and I click on Annotate.net, it's not actually going to show the toolbar because you can't write on a new tab. You can't do anything on a new tab. Even my little mouse that you see over here, the cursor that I've changed, if I go to the new tab, you'll see it's not showing, it's not displaying. A new tab in Chrome is like you can't do anything to it. Tab, your home screen, I don't know what you want to call it, why it does that, but that's how it works. So before you can even see your Annotate.net screen, you first need to go to some sort of page. So let's go to WCED Online. I can't type today. Right, so there's WCED Online, and now you'll see suddenly my cursor is there, suddenly my annotation tools are there. Everything has come back, and it's all working again. Right, so that's just something you need to know. The other thing about Annotate.net, it is a funny one in that it keeps on logging itself out for some reason, especially if you've got using multiple devices. I have a laptop and a desktop, so usually when I'm working on my desktop and I'm using Annotate.net, it logs it out of my laptop. Then I need to go log it in again on my laptop, etc., etc. So that is just something about it. Once it is logged in and once you're actually working with it actively, then it won't go out. Then it'll stay there and do its thing until you are done with it. But it just does that sometimes, and it likes faking that it's logged in, and then 5 minutes into the session, then it asks you to log in again. So good rule of thumb, if you are going to present something and you are going to use Annotate.net, try and log in with it, or try and make sure that you open it up at least 15 to 20 minutes before you start with the presentation, so that it can figure out that it still needs to log in. But logging in is literally a case of click login with Chrome, and then, or log in with Google or Microsoft, and then you're good to go. Right. I think that's everything I need to say about the annotation tools. You need to play around with it, experiment with it. There's obviously a lot more. There are more features built into these things that I'm not showing you now. But the idea again is explore, see what you can find, see what else you can discover in these tools. Right, but we have looked at everything to do with annotation tools. Are there any questions? No questions?
Yeah, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So I'm using Google Chrome. It's Liesl speaking. I'm using Google Chrome. If I click on that little puzzle icon thingy, I only see my Grammarly, my malware, and then unblock origin, whatever that means. I don't.
Origin.
Yeah, you block. I don't see any of those cool icons that you are displaying that I see on your screen.
Okay. Have you tried clicking on that link that I shared in the chat, meeting chat?
Well, I've tried downloading. No, okay. Let's see if that works.
Because remember, these
Okay.
extensions, the way that these
Yeah.
Chrome extensions work is these are custom extensions that you install. They're not default part of Chrome. You choose what you want to
Oh,
add. So,
okay.
so the default Chrome will have nothing on it. You have
Oh,
obviously added Grammarly, and you have added uBlock Origin seems to creep into everyone's. I don't know why. It's a good one to have, by the way. It's not like it's a bad one.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it creeps into everyone's extensions.
Right.
Those are the two extensions that almost everyone seems to have: it's Grammarly and uBlock Origin. But there's a lot of other very cool ones that you can play around with. And then, as Jennifer has pointed out, something that you also need to keep in mind: if you are using a school account, the administrators can block the installation of these things as well. So if
Yeah, I'll check. Sorry here, interrupter. I can't. So I'm only starting a new school in Jan, so I don't have. So I can't log into the annotate.net as yet because I want to sign in as with
yeah,
my school account.
yes,
So
yeah, that's a better idea.
as
Wait for
you
that.
said, I'll play around with it once I have my account.
Yes.
But I thought it just Chrome is that cool and it comes with all those cool things. So okay, now I've got a better understanding. Thank you so much.
All right. Chrome is that cool, but it wants you to do a little bit of work on your own as well.
That's fine. No, that's fine. Yeah.
But yeah, so there's a lot of different. There's hundreds of these extensions out there that you can use, and different people have different ones that they have. Also, something that's useful, those of you, just a quick little side note, with these things, you can also pin the ones that you use a lot. So I've got a couple ones that I've pinned that I use quite often. Specifically, those are the ones that I use a lot. Google Black Menu is one of the coolest ones you can ever get, especially if you use a lot of Google stuff. This is a great little tool. It's like a shortcut to everything in your Google. Then there's annotate.net. As I said, I use that a lot. Loom is my favorite screen recorder. I like it. And then I do a lot of design stuff. So this is a useful little tool of just getting the colors from certain things. And I just drop it, get the eyedropper. But anyway, so there's lots of different extensions that we use, or that I use from time to time. I've also installed, I've probably deleted 30 or 40 of them by now, because you have to also be careful. Extensions, installing too many extensions can weigh down your Chrome. So just kind of be a little bit careful of that if you have, especially if you've got an under-resourced PC. Right, so are we all happy with annotation tools? So at this point in time, our focus has been purely on just making the Loom is the one that I use. A Loom, just something with Loom again. Jennifer, you're welcome to send me an email regarding Loom, but Loom is kind of like Screencastify or like all those other ones. The nice thing about Loom is, again, if you have an education account, you can get the premium Loom for free with your education account, which is a great little perk. So no more limitations in the length of your videos and stuff like that. Anyway, I think we need to at some point have a session where everyone shares the cool extensions that they're using. Don't even know Power Director, definitely going to go scratching around, seeing what it is. Is that similar to Loom, Clifford? Or similar to Screencastify, Screencast-O-Matic, those things? Yeah, Loom is amazing. I agree, Marna. Okay, a bit more advanced. Going to have a look at it, definitely. Right, so our next step is, once we've made things look good, because I think that I like how we're getting, just park these ideas for a second, because there is a session, there is a slide later that I'm going to ask you to share cool ideas with us as well. And I didn't actually introduce the session in that sense, but something that I really want to focus on moving forward is having our group of trainers connect more often, sharing ideas, sharing experiences, and building each other as well. Because I by no means believe that I know every single trick in the book and have the best ideas. I'm just sharing what I've found works quite well so far. Right. And the next part is very much a case of personal preference, because different people like different things when it comes to audience interaction. Because we have to think to ourselves, how are we going to get the audience to engage more and make the fact that you've joined a live session more meaningful than just watching a recording. I think one of the benefits of this is often when we watch a recording, we kind of skip to parts that we're interested in, or we listen with half an ear because we're actually doing other things. Sometimes when we're doing live sessions, it just focuses us to be a little bit more attentive. That's just how I am usually. Yes, it's a great idea, Bradley. I think we should definitely have a look at something like that. But I just kind of, when I'm not in a live session, I don't think I pay as much attention to these sessions as I should. So we need to keep in mind that there's a value in the audience interaction that we can bring in. And we need to think of ways how to do it. Now, again, we've got the option, as with all the other things that we have, polls in Teams, where I can just automatically import and show it and have people respond in that way. But this is the same as with our other presentation tools and our other things that we looked at. Unfortunately, when we try to do that, we will always run into a situation where, yes, I know Discord is a bit of an interesting one. It's got cool functions. And anyway, so polls again gives us that same problem in that if we are all using our official Office licenses or accounts at least, and if we're using the desktop app, etc., then perfect, then it works, then that'll work well. So what I often say is if we're having internal meetings in the Western Cape, or when we're using our Western Cape government email addresses, an internal meeting, these things work very well to add engagement to our own internal meetings. Same will apply if you are using a Microsoft license. If you're a Microsoft school and you're having these meetings and you're using polls there, works brilliantly. The problem is we've got such a diverse group of people joining that we need to find common denominators. And polls, for me, at this point in time, I'm finding too often it doesn't work the way that I want it to work. So we have to look at other tools and other ways to do this, right? So polls and Teams, I'm not saying we can't use it. I'm just saying it does come with certain flaws, right? So our next option we can look at, and this is one I'm going to stop at. I'm actually going to show you how this works, because I personally, and again, personal preference, I'm a big fan of what Slido can do for us and using Slido as a tool. And I think it's a tool that can work very well in a classroom environment as well. Now, unfortunately, again, one of those ones where it's great, paid for version is amazing. But unfortunately, I would love to give everyone paid for Slidos. I would love to have a paid for Slido account, just for me at least. But unfortunately, we have to look at the free options. Now, especially when it comes to audience interaction. And maybe someone in this group has found the perfect tool for this. But audience interaction is always a tricky thing when it comes to the free tools, because they always have some kind of limitation in them. Mentimeter is great, same limitations. Poll Everywhere does the same thing, basically. Answer Garden, these things all kind of do the same thing, but they all have that kind of limitation within them, right? So I'm glad someone said Miro, because that's our kind of next step. So this is just our polling software where we get people's responses and reactions. But then, did I write Miro? No, I didn't. All right, I wanted to actually say /Miro. I forgot to just put that down there. So let's just write it by hand, right? See why this annotation tool is great. I don't have to actually go and edit my slide. Just pop it in there. Right, so Slido Mentimeter, this is our reactions, where we test reactions. Jamboard and Miro is where things get a little bit more complicated in terms of the response. Now, I absolutely love Miro. Those of you who haven't tried it yet, go use it. It is an amazing tool. But it comes back to thinking about the people that are going to be attending our sessions. I think this is an ambitious goal that we could work towards as a group, is getting people who are attending our sessions comfortable and used to the idea of using something like Miro. However, I was in a session 2 weeks ago, I think, where all of us were supposed to use Miro, and it just was a mess, unfortunately, because it does have a much steeper learning curve than something like Jamboard. Now, Jamboard, I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with Jamboard. It is a very simple tool, and it has the functionality is very basic, especially the web app tool. The Android-based tool is a lot better, and the Chromebook-based Jamboard is great. But the web app Jamboard isn't particularly wonderful, but it has a very quick learning curve. It's an easy to use tool. So what I want us as a group to start doing, when you are asked to present a session, even if it's not included in it, you need to start asking yourself not only how I'm going to present this thing, so what kind of presentation tools am I going to use? Am I going to use annotate.net? Am I going to use my view board? Do I have another cool little tool up my sleeve? Am I going to share my screen? How am I going to make it presentable? But then we also need to start asking ourselves, how do I bring the audience in? And especially when we have sessions where there is, because the idea is we're supposed to have 2 people per session, one that's doing the presentation, one that's kind of doing the chat line managing. But the chat line person becomes really important when it comes to this audience interaction. And I don't feel it's something that has really gotten to the point where it can be. Because once we get this going, it starts adding a lot of value to our live sessions. Not only does it do that, it's also going to, and we have to realize that when we are presenting, we are also showcasing and modeling good practice. So in a classroom environment, if there are a number of kids that have cell phones, then these tools can start becoming very useful. Jamboard can start becoming a great tool. Sorry, now Miro's disappeared again. Miro, again, wonderful tool. Mobile friendly, not so much. I don't think so. It can, I mean, at a stretch it is, but again, it's more of a, you need a bigger screen. You need a little bit more to play around with it. So what I want us to do today, and what I'm going to do with this session now, is I'm going to show you how Slido works quickly, and then we can jump into Jamboard as well if you've never done Jamboard before. But I want you to go and explore on your own when you get time. Go and explore Miro. It really is a great tool. And Mentimeter is also a nice tool, and especially when you need to use these two in collaboration because of the limitations that they both have. Right, so let's have a look at what these things do. And this is going to be a crash course in how to use Slido, by the way. It's not going to be an extensive session on Slido. That is something that I think is scoped for future development. If anyone is curious and interested in how that works, you're welcome to contact me. And we can talk about how one goes about doing that. But it is something that I think we need to look at doing it at future. Oh, now it's just gone away. Right, at a future date. So let's just quickly open up there. Right, so Slido works both in slides and in PowerPoint. Unfortunately, I can't install it in my PowerPoint because of the corporate device that I'm working with. But you're welcome to have a look at how it works. So it's an extension that you add to a presentation tool like slides. So if you haven't worked with these extensions yet, again, you've got a lot of playing around and exploration to do. But over here, you'll see there, I can go to extensions. I've got a couple of different extensions installed. Not that many. I'm just going to keep it nice and simple. And Slido for Google Slides, I'm going to open the sidebar here. So it's one of those things, you kind of build your presentation first, and then you add your Slido into that. Right. So I think we're going to want to use this little tool to do some of this. Yeah, right. So I'm going to go here with Slido. I need to log in to my account first, and then it'll take me over here, blah, blah, blah. It's the usual thing. I've got my account. Thank you. Right. So now the Slido sidebar allows me to go and say, I'm going to create a session. I want to add a new one. And this is something you obviously do before your session. So here I've got a number of options. I've got multiple choice, open text, word cloud, rating, ranking, quiz. Now, like with many of these things, there's one very frustrating limitation, and that is you can only add 3 of them on the free tool. You can't add unlimited. I think you can actually add the quiz, I'll be honest, I haven't really played around with the quiz so much. I think the quiz, you can add as many as you want to, questions in here. So here I'm going to say, I'm going to add open text. And I'm going to say, what other cool tools do you know of, right? And I want to say, we don't have to show your names. Actually, we can show your names. And we're going to say, add to presentation. It's as simple as that. Now what it's going to do is it adds a new slide into my Slido, right? So there's my audience interaction one. There I've got this, what other cool tools do you know of? The problem is here, I'm still sitting with this issue that I don't know how to log in yet, how to connect yet. So now I just need to have my joining instructions. I'm just going to add my joining instructions slide in here. And typically what we'll do is we can move this joining instructions slide right to the start. What I tend to do when I set up these things is I like adding this little number. I'll have a thing over here where I'll, just to quickly show you what works quite well. Let's just add a little white block there. And then with some text that says, need to change that to white. Right, let's call it Slido. And again, this is one of those things that the more we use it, the more familiar people will become with it. The less people will, I mean, you'll all remember when we started with our online presentations, half of the presentation was just, everyone please turn off your mics, everyone please turn off your cameras, everyone please do this, everyone please do that. So people have gotten used to that. So you can do something like this. It looks terrible, but I'll make it look better. And now I see what my number is over there. So using annotate.net, when I present the thing, I just physically write that little number in there. Okay. And here, right at the end, what's also quite nice, we're going to add audience Q&A. Let's just, because we can, add another little, let's just do a word cloud. Okay. How would you describe this session in one word? We all know how these word clouds work. Add presentation. Right, now the idea of these things is this is supposed to lead us into conversations and discussions. So what I'll do now, once I've got my basic thing set up, now everyone needs to grab their cell phones quickly because I'm going to present it with Slido. And here goes my presentation. It's going to load now. Now, while it is loading, the one thing that I will say about Slido that is unfortunate is that it flattens your presentation. In other words, all the animation triggers that you have, I'm personally a big fan of the idea that text shouldn't all just appear at once. I like it to appear one by one. But what it'll do is it'll flatten your presentation. Now, what I want you to do is grab your phone's QR codes. That's why I didn't want to really tell you how to do this in the beginning, or how to type in. Never mind. Didn't want to share the link to the registration. I want you to just do a QR code scanner. So get your QR code scanners out, scan the code. Right. So now you'll notice that you're actually in Slido and you can ask questions in there. So does someone want to type a question into the Slido? Right, I just asked a question. Hi, Yaku. Someone also said, hi, Yaku. You will also notice that people can upvote questions. Now, what I want you to imagine here for a second, what's pretty cool about this, okay, and we'll get to, I see there's actually some useful questions. Now, what's nice about this is that I can still go on with my presentation. So here's my presentation happening on the screen. You are asking questions. And while you're asking questions, you don't have to look on the screen and go to the chat and things like that. You can just focus on the presentation. You've got your cell phone on the side where you're asking questions. Now, when you go to polls, you'll see there are no active polls. But as I move this thing along and I get to an actual poll, right, now you'll notice that your phone should change to the question. How would you describe this session in one word? So let's try and be right. So awesome. Great, informative. Oops, I went to the wrong one. Sorry. Great, informative, amazeballs, fast, exciting, informative, interesting, amazeballs, fast, enriching. Da, da, da. Anyway, right. Very different from the norm. I'm hoping that's a good different from the norm. So I hope you can immediately see how I can start using this tool. And what's great is now, if you look to your phone, you'll see that we're just going to go on to the next question. And on your phone, it'll automatically change based on the fact that I'm in a new question. So what other cool tools do you know of? And now if I want to be fancy, so let's be fancy here for a second. And we're going to add a little stopwatch in here, a timer. I'm going to give you that's probably too long. Right, let's give you 2 minutes to go and write down any cool tools that you can think of. Why is this thing not wanting to move? Oh, there we go. Maybe 2 minutes is too long. This is always the point where we need to find a cool tool that we can quickly drop some background music into what we are doing. Audacity, that's an interesting blast from the past. Is a great tool as well. Rainbow cursor, explain everything. Winamp, ooh, that's old school. Right, I'm going to stop it there. I think we get the point. The idea behind this is now I'm actually getting responses from people, right? I'm actually getting responses. I've got 14 people who've responded to these questions, and this can lead to a conversation. Remember, we can upvote things, we can downvote things, we can rate things, we can do all sorts of different little tricks and different little tools with this, getting reaction from the people in our session. So that is where that becomes important. And what I like about this is the fact that it doesn't take you out of the presentation. Yeah, I've still got my presentation going. I'm just simply moving through the presentation and getting to the next thing, getting to the next thing. So I also want you to consider the application of this in a classroom environment. If you are in a classroom where learners do have mobile devices or where the cell phone policy allows the use of these things, you can have your presentation and set up little questions right throughout your presentation. And then whenever that happens, the question pops up on their phone, multiple choice, and then they answer the quiz, right? Whiteboard Fire is, I haven't really I played around a little bit with Whiteboard Fire. It does look like a great tool, I must say. Right. So again, here we've got some positive. I'm glad that there's some positive feedback over here. But you also, again, you can understand how this can lead to audience interaction, audience discussion, all sorts of things like that. Right? Let's go on. So I think what we need to do, and I like what someone has mentioned here. I don't know if Bradley wants to take the lead in that, or you can contact me with regards to that, that we set up a central kind of place where we share ideas about tools, share ideas about things that we're using. For me, what's really important is I want us to move to a point where we are actually, what do you mean? How do we end the conversation? On a positive note, I'm hoping. Right.
No, I'm sorry, I mean, like this Slido,
Yes.
if I'm done with my lesson and I don't want the conversation to go on because tomorrow I want them to start from fresh again. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes,
I'll
yes, yes, I
end
understand.
it, and then tomorrow I will see, because they said some things, I will add another slide or another question for tomorrow's lesson. So how do I end? You understand? So that they
Okay.
can't. That is how I mean.
Right. So all that I need to do is that if I'm out here, you can see the where am I now? Let me just get onto this thing. Right. So what I need to do is I need to open this thing on Slido itself. Right. So let me actually go to the Slido site. I think there is a way to do it through. There is a way to actually do it through slides itself, but I'm not 100% sure how. But from this point, when we're in here, now we can just go into this actual session where it'll show you all of these different things that you've got over here, and you just need to go and I'm trying to remember, where is that thing again? Now, why can't I find the stop thing? As I said, now I honestly can't remember exactly where the stop button is. There is a stop button, I know that. I'm just trying to figure out where this thing actually is. Um, well, I suppose you can always delete it, but you don't want to delete it. Oh yeah, I see. I think what I've done is I've set it to be active for a certain time period. When I started this, when I actually started it, I think you set, if I remember correctly now, you set up the duration, and it is open for a week. But there is a way that you can prevent that from happening. I'll have to go and scratch around. If it's okay, I'll get back to you, Carlo, with regards to that.
Thank you very much.
Right. I'm a little bit unsure where exactly you get that setting. But anyway, right. So I'll go scratch around. I'll get back to you exactly how that happens, and I'll just include that in the message to the email that I'll send with everyone late after the session. Right. So just to get back to this point, I really appreciate the idea that we have of sharing some of the tools that we have. For me, one of the most important things is when we look. Yes, I agree exactly, Carlo. It really is a great tool to get interaction from the learner side as well. So I think what's important when we look at these tools, for me, what's always a useful thing is we will be able to present these tools so much better if these are things that we're actively using in our class. And if it's not just something that we're engaging with when it comes to online virtual presentations. So Slido, annotate.net, my view board, everything that we looked at today are things that have classroom application as well. So I really want to encourage you to try and start using these tools more in your classroom and explore different tools. And if they are great tools and you've got great ideas, then we do need to set up a platform where we can easily share these ideas and share these things with each other. I like that. I'll take that on as a challenge to figure out how we can have an effective space where we can communicate, talking about these things. But really, it's been for me, it's been a very positive experience, this engaging with so many of our trainers with the hope of really making sure that we improve what we're doing. Now, one thing that's really critical that I forgot to include into my slide, what for me is almost the most important part of all of this really is that we would really like to see that all the trainers that we have become very actively involved in becoming change agents in their schools. Now, I know many of you already are, but it's such a critical thing that I don't want to say you practice on your peers, but in a way, if you're using it in your classroom and you're helping your colleagues in your school use these tools, you're going to be so much more effective. You're going to be so much more effective when we're presenting it on a bigger platform. So a lot of what I showed you today are little tools that will help you present it better virtually. But ultimately, it comes back to that same basic. If we look at like something like the TPAC model, if we do not have the content knowledge, it just falls flat. Take that Slido as an example. If I need to present Slido to an audience, then I can't have Carlo asking me questions about how do I actually close this thing, because I should know this. I should know how to just open it and stop the session. So it's important to do that. Luckily, I'm going to claim that this session wasn't just about Slido. So hopefully you'll give me a little bit of leeway and grace there. But it is something that I need to now find out how it works. Then what I do want to talk about as well, because this is obviously our last engagement for the year, part of how we are moving forwards, and I think Hannah, I saw her name is earlier. I think Andrea is also here. Marna has also gone through this, and John, I think, has also gone through this. So there's a couple of people who have gone through this course, but so I might not hold you to going through this course. But the important part is what we're looking at next year as well is early on in term 1. We want everyone to go through this online facilitated course, because this is kind of a little bit more where we also see our online training heading, where it becomes more of a hybrid thing, that we're going to have live sessions, short ones, short and to the point. I think some of the facilitated ones were really, really short and to the point, which is great. But then there's a lot of work that you kind of work through on your own. Being trainers and already being at a level where your ICT skills are good, you should find this to be quite quick and easy, but hopefully very stimulating, because this is going to lead to our face-to-face discussions that we also want to have. Thanks for that positive feedback, Marna. The idea is it's going to hopefully open up your mind, let you think a little bit differently about technology and ICT in general. And most importantly, it's going to help us have good discussions and conversations going forward, where we can share ideas and share different things that we can do heading forward. So that's going to start early on in January. Once you get that link to join the whole process, please jump on board, get on board and move ahead with it. So it really has been great having so many of you in here. I finished just on time. This is something I never do, so I'm very chuffed with how I managed my time today. And that is the end of my story. Is there anyone who has any more questions, any comments, anything that you want to add? As I said, Marna, it's great to have feedback. Those of you who have actually done the digital skills program, you can also, if you have anything that you would like to add, say it's going to be fun, it's interesting, you're also welcome. Yes, Liesel, I've got a list of trainers essentially. And remember, what we've done is we've sent out that request, are you still interested in remaining a trainer? And everyone who said yes, plus a couple of people we had to prod because they were actively involved in the past, is on that list. So the list that I have, we're going to send the same thing to that. We're going to send our notifications to that email address. If your email address has changed, please just pop me an email, and then I will update it on our trainer pool. And obviously, the email address that you registered with now, you will receive the recording of the session plus a couple of other links, etc., etc. You will receive that on that email address. Right. I don't know if there are any new trainers that have not actually been part of our training corps now for the past. I know there's a couple of people who have not had the opportunity to train. One of the good things, one of the Okay, Jennifer, was that just you're a new trainer? Great. One of the good things about the digital skills program that we're doing, or what I like about it, is it allowed me to stumble onto some great trainers like Hannah, who's here, and Lindy, who's here, who we were able to then make part of the team, essentially, because you are going to submit some stuff that we can see what your skills really are. So yes, I'll work on making a plan of getting something that we can use to share our skills and our thoughts and our ideas and whatever we want to put on there, share with each other so that we can continue growing. And please continue the great work that you're already doing at your schools. It really is appreciated. Welcome aboard, Abigail. Glad to have you with us. Right. Thank you, everyone. This is the point in the meeting where you're welcome to turn your mic on. You're welcome to turn your camera on, show your faces, wave, say hi, and say bye.
Bye, Yaku.
Bye. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.
Everyone's too scared to have their voices immortalized on this recording.
Thank you, Yaku. Great presentation. Thank you so much.
Pleasure, Liesel.
Okay, bye.
Bye, sir.
Goodbye. Have a good day.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Yaku. Great meeting you.
Thank you. And I really look forward to having face-to-face engagements with all of you in the not too distant future. Oh, I forgot. Those of you who have not signed the attendance register, please do so before you leave if you missed that. Oh, I just realized many of you have already left now. Pleasure, Jason. Pleasure, Charlene.
Yaku, can you just reinsert the